so thrilled to be here. And you know what today is? Today is my 65th birthday.
Wow.
And I can't think of a better way to spend my birthday. Doing what I like most. So, glad you took the time out of your crazy schedules to come. And my wife got her master's in chemistry here at Summers as part of the NSF program, Put a Man on the Moon, improved teaching of science in high schools back in the early 70s, graduated in 73. My son graduated from here in 98 from the business school with finance and computer applications. And my wife got really involved in the school, and I got really involved with her, carrying her bags and going to the parties. And in 2008, they made me an honorary alum. So I was very happy with that. I was number 33 in the history of the school, so that was kind of neat. So I like to do all that I can, and one of my objectives for this program, what do I have to point this at? If I do this over there? One of my objectives for this session is to identify any ways in which I can help you succeed, either here at Notre Dame or succeed in learning some very powerful tools that a lot of companies out there want and people they're hiring. And as you know, getting jobs these days is tough, so if I can help give you some advantages, I would be thrilled. The tools and the information that I will teach you is not the only way to improvement, but it's very powerful ways to improvement. It can make improvement easier. There's a man by the name of Father Joyce, who was vice president when Father Hesburgh was president. Hopefully you know at least one of those names, if not both. And there's a man by the name of Dr. Emil T. Hoffman, who taught chemistry and ran the freshman year of studies for many, many years. And when Father Joyce became vice president, I think it was back around 62, the graduation rate at Notre Dame was somewhere around 60% in 4 years. And he worked together with Dr. Hoffman, and when Dr. Hoffman retired, the graduation rate at Notre Dame was over 95%, and the successful completion of the freshman year of studies was over 99%. They did that without any of these tools. So these are not the only tools for improvement, and focusing on the customer and focusing on improvement are two values that can take you a long, long way. But what I'm going to talk to you about today is some tools that have evolved since 1940, which most corporations in the world believe are essential to their success. And I hope you'll find them interesting. I'm not going to teach you the tools, but I'm going to talk a lot about companies I've worked with, my experience, some of it entrepreneurial, most of it entrepreneurial. So there'll be some things on quality, some things on innovation, some things on entrepreneurship, and I hope you enjoy it. Another reason I'm very happy to be here is 20 years ago, this month, October of 1991, I did a workshop on quality at Notre Dame for 50 of the faculty members of the business school. And we used a tool called the 7 Management and Planning Tools. And the theme, the focus, was to make the best design we could for the Mendoza School of Business. And at that presentation, after 5 minutes, one of the faculty raised their hands. I think he was the curmudgeon. And he said, "I hope you don't want us to consider the students as customers. We're here to preserve the wisdom of the ages." It was a little bit out of line for the workshop, but that's okay. But unfortunately, I just blew it off and put the blinders on and went on with the workshop. So for the last 20 years, I've been thinking about how could I have better handled that question. And so that's part of what you're going to get at the beginning of today. There'll be a little bit of history, which I think is valuable to know. If we don't know history, we have to repeat it or something like that. So, one more. There it is. Hope you don't want to consider the students as customers. Very interesting. Okay. Now, there are hundreds of quality and innovation tools. And according to a faculty member at the Harvard Business School, there are only two that you need to know. So I want to make sure that coming to this lecture, you know the two of them. One is called the Pareto chart, and one is called the fishbone chart or root cause analysis. And I'm so thrilled there's a couple of healthcare people here because that's my passion these days. I have to click this. So, the Pareto chart looks at what are the causes. And Pareto was an Italian economist in the 1980s. No, in the 1800s, excuse me. And he came to the conclusion that wealth was not evenly distributed. Some of the people had most of the money. Wow. And so that name is attached to this tool. Some of the problems cause most of the trouble. And finding out which problems cause most of the trouble is one of the most important things you can do in quality, because if you fix that problem, then you fix most of the trouble. So one of the things that people are talking about today is the cost of healthcare is too much. And what this chart shows is that in 2009, the cost of healthcare up the top was $2.6 trillion. And so if we ask what are the components of that, we see there's one bar, chronic illness, just under half the cost. So if we fix this problem, then we make huge impact on the cost of healthcare. The second tool is the root cause analysis. The root cause analysis, or fishbone chart, or Ishikawa chart, it goes by different names. You make a chart and it's got key factors and then sub-factors. You ask the question 5 times. Why is this the biggest cost? Why are those happening, and so on, until you go down to the root causes. So as it turns out, the problem is called self-care. Self-care means, and these are people with diabetes, asthma, cardiovascular. Self-care means, in our definition, take your meds, check your blood pressure, your blood sugar, and manage your diet. And only 15% of the people in the U.S. with chronic illness do that. The ones that don't do it get sick. They end up in the emergency room in the hospital. And the cost of treating them is almost 50% of the cost of healthcare. Now, when I shared this finding with some healthcare leaders in Washington, the strategic planner for the Center for Disease Control says, your numbers are wrong, your numbers are wrong. And what I found out was they wanted to throw in some other things like cancer and back pain and so on. And so they say that this is 75%. So it's at least 50%. So those are the two tools. Always ask, what is the major cause of the problem? And what are the root causes? And what are the key solutions? Now the key solution in this case is getting a pharmacist involved. Getting the pharmacist involved more actively as part of the team is a key factor, because almost in some studies up to 85% of the prescriptions are wrong. The dosage is too high, the dosage is too low, it's the wrong medicine, it's the wrong combination of medicine, there's not instructions to the patient. You get a pharmacist involved and they help coach the patient. In the first year it typically goes from 15% self-care to 85% self-care. working with the Center for Medicare Medicaid Innovation Center, and our calculations are, if we scale up what we know about that, the savings is $1 trillion in this decade. Huge, huge opportunity. Okay, and I'll try to go through this history stuff quick, but I think it's good to know some of the names. W. Edwards Deming launches modern quality. During World War II, if you were preparing anything for the war effort, you had to use a control chart. Everybody know what a control chart? Anybody know what a control chart is? Yes, no, maybe so. So it looks something like this. So this is variation. So this was developed by Schuhart. And if the numbers stay within the mathematically constructed control chart, then it means the system is in control. If a point goes outside of that, it's a special cause. So this is what was taught as part of the war effort in the Second World War II. And the second part is called the plan, do, check, act cycle, which means that continuous improvement starts with planning, trying something, checking to see if you get the good results, either implementing it or continuing to find the right solution. At the end of the Second World War, the law that required that was repealed. The war's over, we don't have to force people to do this. Deming was devastated. What do you think he did? He asked two questions. What's the root cause, and what's the biggest problem? He said the biggest problem is we didn't teach the CEOs how to do this. If we taught the CEOs how to do it, they would know how powerful it was and they would have done it. So the Japanese are rebuilding. General MacArthur's in charge, 1950. The Japanese thought that the U.S. won the war because of Deming. Japanese were in process of trying to smuggle out Deming's class notes when the war ended. So when they're rebuilding Japan, they say to MacArthur, can you bring over Deming? We'd like him to give us lectures. So Deming comes over, and what do you think he says? I'll do it as long as the CEOs are taught first. Japanese did that in the starting in 1950. They expanded it to managers in 54, to foremen in 60, and to production workers in 62. And in 1965, they developed a name for the program called Total Quality Control. All employees in all departments every day improving quality, cost, procedures, and systems to give customers product which is most qualified and most timely. Japanese then expanded the TQC in 1972. They introduced the 7 management and planning tools for people in service organizations or for administration that wanted to do quality. So you all have a little book, and if you're reading or looking at your other notes, you don't have to. But if you're curious, at some point, did you get one or not yet? Okay, I'll get you one. Anybody else not get a book or notes? Page 24 and 25 in the introduction. Thank you. Those are notes produced specifically for this group, and they sit on top of our Greenbelt training booklet. In 1972, they released the 7 management and planning tools. These are the ones that I used with the 50 business school professors 20 years ago this month to help design the new Mendoza building. In 1978, they expanded the use of the continuous improvement of planning, strategic planning, which is called Hoshin Kanri, and also the continuous improvement of product design. So those of you who told me you're into engineering and you want to work for manufacturing, this quality function deployment is a pretty powerful tool. And it's really displayed over here on the board to your right. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. Better quality, lower cost. Japanese products start arriving in the U.S. It's like another war. My wife was reminding me, she listens to me do these talks, and she said, I remember, they said, buy American, don't buy Japanese. The Japanese products were higher quality, lower cost. Buy American cars, don't buy Japanese cars. But this was a major threat for automobiles, for copiers, for cameras, and so on. In 1978, a new mayor of Lawrence, Massachusetts, an old textile city, wanted to do something about double-digit unemployment, jobs. You hear people talking about jobs today. Well, he was into jobs in '78 because he had double-digit unemployment. How can we grow jobs? How can we maintain jobs? So a work group was formed, Labor Management Government Coalition, and ended up being a failure. It was a model picked from Jamestown, New York, because they had a lot of strikes in the steel mills. They didn't have any strikes in Lawrence, so it was the wrong model. In 1980, NBC did a documentary of Japan Can, Why Can't We, focusing on the work of W. Edwards Deming. Why can't we make the same high-quality, low-cost products that the Japanese are making? I was working with that committee. I chaired that committee for Laura Lefebvre from the beginning. And since the approach we had picked wasn't using, we were looking for a new approach. That sounded kind of interesting. So I called up Deming and said, will you come and work for us? But it was kind of a funny story because I was having a lot of trouble getting his phone number. So I pictured this large organization, impossible to get through it. So I had all these reasons why they should let me talk to him. The secretary answered and said, oh, just a minute, here's Dr. Deming. So I'm a little flustered. I said, oh, Dr. Deming, I understand you did some work in Japan. What do you mean, some work? And then so we talked a little bit. He said, well, if you're serious, I'll be willing to work with you. And I said, I'll check and see if we're serious and call you back. So I waited 2 days. I called him back, said we were serious. He was very excited about a regional effort for quality, and he worked with us extensively for 5 years. So that was wonderful. So he began, besides his courses, he recommended statistical training to teach the control charts in the PDCA cycle with area businessmen. Oh, by the way, we did the first course. We got 187 executives from 35 companies. Yes! So we had found something that people were looking for. Malden Mills, where I was working, this was volunteer work at the time, was making textile fabric, woven fabric, and they were making it like a sandwich. They cut the pile and they put adhesive on it to hold the fiber in. And they ran into a problem where the adhesive wasn't working and the fiber was falling out. Every engineer that looked at it, they couldn't do anything to fix it. So we did a design of experiments, another one of the tools that the statisticians were teaching us, and they found the solution was to run the fabric through the machine twice as fast and use half as much adhesive. Totally counterintuitive, but that, when we studied the factors that were leading to the results, that was what was key. With Deming assistance, I went with the team of executives to Japan in '83 and '85. We gathered the Japanese publications in Japanese. We brought them back. I got Hewlett-Packard to be the first of the research committee, which took about 3 months. I said, I'll never get this done, so I wrote letters to the CEOs of the Fortune 50 companies. I said, there's going to be 20 companies that are going to see this good stuff. You sign up now or somebody else will take your seat. Within 2 weeks, we had 20 of the Fortune 50 companies, people like IBM and Ford and General Motors and Procter & Gamble, and et cetera. So we went to work, and what we did is we transformed Japanese TQC into American TQM. And later we formed research committees on healthcare, financial services, and universities. In 1985, I asked Komatsu if I could sell one of their books. They actually had one in English, and they refused, and so I said, well, we'll make our own. And so this was the original one, and some of the other ones are in the back. You can take one of them with you. The core of this book you have is some of them, and to date we've sold about 12 million of them.
I have that. The original one.
Oh, there you go. A collector, an early adapter. So, so that gave us a source of revenue. So let me, I apologize for the history, but in a sense I don't apologize for it. Because in a sense you can't really understand this, I think, if you don't know a little bit about the history. But now we're going to get into the stories that are more fun. So this story here, and you have this on the back of your notes, it's in large letters so it's easier to read. So if you turn to the last page, it's easier. You might be able to read it in the notes, it's not too bad. So I'm going to talk about, let's see if I can make this work. We're going to talk about these four things: daily management, Horsemen planning, cross-functional management, and customer-driven master plan. So the first one is daily management. That's the part about continuous improvement, standardization, innovation. I'll give you two examples. In 1986, Ford Motor Company, who was an early adapter, was having trouble with their quality. And they did a root cause analysis, and they said the problem is the suppliers are giving us bad parts. So what we're going to do is we're going to reduce the number of suppliers and only buy from people that give us high quality and low cost. I was very happy with their pitch, because they held this up and they said 19 out of 20 you will not be our suppliers in 20 years, in 2 years. And if you want to be our supplier, buy this book and learn how to do this. So that's what they did. So we sold about 35,000 in several months, so that was kind of nice. Another example is Procter & Gamble Soap Division. I met a fellow in Japan. He was over there studying. He said he had to talk to me, and I said, okay. But I was busy, so I ignored him. It's a bad habit of mine. And so every time he introduces me now, he says, this is Bob King. He blew me off when I met him in Japan, so it's kind of a tough introduction. But so I taught them a tool and the basic tools at Procter & Gamble in the soap division. And in the soap division, they had 46% productivity. That means the machines ran 46% of the time, and 54% of the time the machines were idle. So, what tools do you think they used to solve the problem? Pareto and root cause. Yes, give that man an A. The root cause was the engineers felt that if the machines ran all the time, they'd lose their job. That was the root cause. So they changed the incentive system so the more the machines ran, the more money the engineers made. And then they sped up the machine and the engineers made even more money. Cool, huh? I think it's cool. So they were afraid to tell top management how they had solved the problem because they were pretty embarrassed. But they told all their friends in the other division of this approach spread through Procter & Gamble like wildfire. This was like around 1986, 87. The next part is Horsemen planning, bringing quality improvement to strategic planning, identifying the most important breakthrough, which is called the Horsemen, engaging the whole organization, using catch ball. If I throw you a ball and you say, well, thank you very much, you put the ball in your pocket, is that catch ball? No, you got to throw it back to me, I got to throw it back to you. Okay, so the key thing in Horsemen planning is we play catch ball back and forth until we're totally aligned on what the goals are and how we're going to accomplish them. At Toyota, they have a 5-year Horsemen. The chairman of the board goes away in the summer for 2 months. He comes up with the Horsemen for the next 5 years, the breakthrough for Toyota for the next 5 years. And then he plays catch-ball with the top 50 employees one-on-one until they're all aligned. Top 51 people in the organization are all aligned on the breakthrough for the next 5 years and how they're going to do it. Then they play catch-ball with the people who report to them. Ford Motor Company did this in, called me in 1995 and said, we want to do that ocean planning stuff that Toyota does. So they put together a plan. It was called Ford 2000. Ford's sales are going up. General Motors sales are going up. 1998 comes around. They hire a new CEO. New CEO comes in. Oh, I don't believe in that quality stuff. Ford starts going down. GM starts going up. So having a CEO who's leading the charge is really important for this. Procter & Gamble rebranded it, OGSM, Objectives, Goals, Strategies, and Measures. Sorry. And Procter & Gamble is still using this today as the way they do strategic planning. My wife says I shouldn't say this, but I'll say it anyway. The finance people of Procter & Gamble estimate the profit, the value from this approach since '86 is $2 billion. The largest improvement project in the history of the company. So it's good stuff. Hewlett-Packard was the first U.S. company to use Hoshin. They set as a goal a 10-fold improvement in the company during the decade of the 80s. Motorola said, we're not going to be done by Hewlett-Packard, so they said, we want a 100-fold improvement in the company. So they said, what is that? Well, that's about 4 mistakes per million opportunities, which is, of course, Six Sigma. And that's where the name Six Sigma came from. Came in the 80s, didn't get popularized until the 90s and 2000s. Quality function deployment. A couple minutes over, but I'm going to wrap this up. I want to leave lots of time for questions and so on, comments. So quality function deployment brings quality improvement to product design, the voice of the customer, integrating the voice of the customer with the voice of the engineer to determine appropriate quality characteristics, and including cost control, value engineering, innovation, reliability, process measures, and outcome measures. So if you look over here, that's quality function deployment, overview, 30,000-foot level. The chart in the upper left-hand corner is called the house of quality. Voice of the customer goes on the left, quality characteristics go across the top. One below that is the voice of the engineer. Engineering requirements go down the left side, measures go across the top. The other things, you might be able to see it, there's technology deployment, cost deployment, reliability deployment, and then over on the right you'll see a couple of other charts. Those are the process measures and the outcome measures. So that's the kind of process. So a couple of examples. GM Truck. GM Truck gave me a call and they said, we have a problem that we can't fix. We have a truck that has a tire wear problem. We've had the problem for 5 years. All of our engineers have looked at it. All of our tire engineers have looked at it. Our suppliers have looked at it. Nobody can fix the problem. So what I had him do is the chart in the upper left-hand corner, write down all the customer requirements for tires right across the top, the measures. So next week I come back and I say, okay, how'd you do? Oh, we got it all filled out. So I said, how did you get the measures across the top? And they said, well, we put down the things we measure all the time. I said, no. You got to look at each customer requirement and find a measure for each customer requirement. They found 3 measures that they didn't have. They implemented them, and within 2 weeks, tire wear problem is solved. Very powerful tool. If you're in engineering, if you're in architecture, they use this to develop buildings like a hotel for the first time, and etc. So another example is Intel. Some of you are involved with electrical engineering, familiar with Intel company. So Intel called me around 1990, I don't remember the exact date. Craig Barrett, he was number 2, Andy Grove was number 1. Craig Barrett said, Intel is going to be out of business in 10 years. We have a problem. The problem is the Japanese are getting faster and faster at copying our technology and making it at lower cost. And we estimate with the trends going the way they are, Intel will not survive beyond 1990. So we took 35 of the top people over to Japan. Andy Grove didn't go, but Craig Barrett and his reports and their reports went. And they toured the Japanese plants. They had me at the night explain to them what they were seeing. I didn't go on the tours because the Japanese knew that I was going to be explaining their stuff, but they didn't like it. They thought they should be explaining it, so that was kind of interesting too. So we introduced him to Dr. Yoji Akao. He is the head person in terms of QFD. I had the chance to bring him over to the States to work at Ford World headquarters, to work at IBM World headquarters. And so I introduced the people at Intel to him. They implemented this stuff, and last time I checked, Intel was doing pretty good. They have their ups and downs like everybody, but right now I think they're looking pretty good. Hewlett Packard did this in their laser printer technology in the late 80s, and they're still one of the best at that today. It's too bad that Hewlett Packard has lost their way. We're kind of hoping the new CEO might be getting back on track. Okay. So some people say that quality goes from fad to fad. You heard me mention total quality management. You heard me mention Six Sigma. There's been things called re-engineering. And so my data from doing research with customers and work with customers was that the old stuff is not being abandoned. The new stuff is building on it and correcting some of the weaknesses of the old stuff. So I put together this chart, which is also in the back of your notes so it's more readable, which is like Maslow's hierarchy. Some of you, I think, have probably come across Maslow's hierarchy. So you typically, the easiest way to learn it is you start at the beginning, you take care of that, and then you move up till you get to self-actualization. Someone told me my self-actualization, Maslow's self-actualization overlaps very nicely with getting to the essential. So I'm going to spend, so we talked, this is quality control, checking, auditing, TQM we talked about. I'm going to spend a few minutes on the top 4 and then we'll get to the questions and answers. Lean Six Sigma, I mentioned that, it started with Motorola. What it adds to TQM is design of experiments, Hoshin, and lean tools. And what I've added to it is innovation. I'll talk a little bit about that. Jack Welch, who was the chairman of General Electric, found out from one of his good friends and colleagues at Allied Signal that this was the real McCoy, this Lean Six Sigma stuff. So he decided he was going to implement it. So he called in the investors and he said, our quality is unsatisfactory at General Electric, but we are going to do Six Sigma and it's going to be something special. The investors left, told all their friends, buy GE, buy GE. The stock went crazy. So he got a bonus before he did the first bit of work. Pretty exciting story. So let me tell you about the other side of the coin. Bank of America said, we're going to do Six Sigma. Unfortunately, they didn't do Six Sigma. So the investors said, sell, 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 and we're still selling.
Yeah, I remember when they sold, they had 200 odd people in that group of Six Sigma black belts.
Yes.
2003, 2004.
Yeah.
They cut that whole group.
Yeah.
Let them all go. They were flooded. There were all these people from Bank of America were looking for jobs,
Yeah.
calling people, like I was in the industry at that time, asking, do you have jobs?
I'm obviously very prejudiced, and this is said a little bit of humor, but I thought their major failure was they didn't buy our memory joggers for all their employees. All right, creativity, innovation. We talked about this as, about 25 years ago, the people in our research committee said to me, Bob, this quality stuff is good, but it's slow, incremental improvement. What if you want to go fast and make dramatic improvement? And I said, well, I suppose that you do creativity innovation. So they said, how do you do that? And I said, I don't know, but I'll find out. So I began a study, which still continues today, worldwide in terms of creativity and innovation. So what we've done is develop another Maslow hierarchy for that, which I don't have in here, but 3 basic levels. At the basic level, all employees can use the 7 management and planning tools. And those are good. So there's 2 things you got to think about in picking your creativity innovation tools. One, what's the level of creativity experience of the people? You can't do advanced creativity innovation with people who don't know how to do basic creativity. And the second thing is, how difficult is the project? If you're in an organization, you want to do something that was done at your plant down the street, you could bring in some of those people, you could do brainstorming and you're done. You could do the 7 management planning tools, figure out your implementation plan and everything. If the solution has been done by other industries, but not by your industry, then you want the second level, which is the 7 creativity tools, which were developed by the world's largest research project in creativity innovation. It was done by Patel in the 70s, and it was so successful. They asked all the largest European companies to bring in their toughest unsolved problems. They solved the problems, and then the companies said, well, you have to teach us how you did this. And I said, no, we're not in the training business, we're in the consulting business. And they argued about it, and finally they said, Helmut Schlicksup, who was one of the 4 people they hired, said, you do the training. I says, fine. 250,000 people got trained, not counting who those people trained. So that's what, I worked with Helmut Schlicksup, we put together these 7 creativity tools, and that's what the second level is. The third level actually came out of Russia, by the people who taught the engineers who developed Sputnik and a lot of other things. You just don't expect that the most advanced form of innovation is going to come out of Russia. But this has been under development for 65 years. Oh, it's my 65th birthday. Yeah, the year I was born is when they started doing this. It was a patent, a person working for the Army, and he collected worldwide patents and analyzed them, and he grouped them according to the ones that were just little changes and the ones that were new science. And he organized it into a system. And then eventually it evolved, and I set up training centers and problem-solving centers where the criteria was you could only bring in a problem that no one had been able to solve for 5 years. One of my colleagues lives across the border up in Michigan. He's probably the top guy in the world at this. He estimates he solved 10,000 problems that no one could solve for 5 years. So very powerful stuff, and you really need to understand some of the basics. But Nikolai Tomenko, a colleague of mine, unfortunately, untimely death from cancer earlier this year, headed up the group for Samsung to introduce trees. He did one project that saved $1 billion. Samsung makes all of the critical parts of iPods and iPads using trees. So everybody's talking about Apple, but the company who's making the guts is Samsung. And now Samsung is introducing some of their own stuff, and we're starting to see some of the patent fighting going on. Yes? Oh, cool. This is so exciting.
It is. It's extremely exciting.
So save your question, and we'll take it as the first question. And let me just finish a couple of slides. There are different schools of trees. Nikolai was kind of on his own. My view is was the third brightest guy in the world on the subject. And then the two top people are with a group called Ideation, and they're up in not too far from Detroit, Hills area. And it's a husband and wife combination. But we'll talk about that in just a minute. The other thing I want to say, some of you are into healthcare and some of you are into engineering, so we've got an example that covers both. Rick Holden runs the Houston, Texas Healthcare Angel Group. It's the second largest group in the country giving money to people doing projects. I had some meeting with some of the Notre Dame people the other day, and they're going to get in touch with me to see if they can get some money for their projects. One of the tools in trees that ideation uses, I suspect nobody else, is called AFD, which is anticipatory failure determination. And what you do with that is you look at all the ways you could force something, all the ways something could fail, even if it's never failed that way before. And it's a systematic analysis. And then you use innovation to prevent it from ever happening. So this guy, Rick Holdren, starts a new company every month. And he puts all of them through this AFD process to make sure that they won't fail. You can read some of this. Transformation. Well, let me just tell you a story from Humanitas. Humanitas is a large residential complex for the elderly in the Netherlands. They have what they call the yes culture. So if one of the residents asks for something, you have to say yes. You can't say no. So if they want 2 dogs, they can have 2 dogs. If they want 5 dogs, they can have 5 dogs. You can't say no. And if you want to say no, you have to go to the head person. And it's just incredible. You know how sad elderly housing is. This place is rocking and rolling, and they've got all kinds of parties and bars. And in the Netherlands, if you want to die when you get old, you can. That's legal. No one has ever asked to die. Cool stuff. Getting to the essential. This is Notre Dame stuff. Being clear about the ultimate goal, sustainability of the company or planet, solving key global problems like hunger, literacy, global warming. I think examples would be the Notre Dame Haiti project, the Notre Dame project for safe drinking water, and some other ones that you're doing. I hope you know about that stuff. I can cover it. Lessons for entrepreneurs. I'll let you answer this. During the thing, I put down a couple things that I thought were lessons. Quality in higher ed began around 1988 with the leadership of IBM and Xerox. That failed, and they tried corporations adopting universities. That failed. Then Carnegie Mellon tried. And then finally, the National Consortium for Continuous Improvement is working pretty good. I'm happy that Notre Dame, now in the administration building, has an office of continuous improvement and are active members of the NCCI. In healthcare, let me say this, you're getting ready, you gotta go, right? Boy, did I go wrong, terrible. So tell me about trees.
I misheard, I thought it was T-R-E-E-S.
Oh, okay.
I was like, that's not on the board.
T-R-I-Z, okay.
Never mind.
Okay, so final thing I'll mention, most of my work is in healthcare. There's a couple of healthcare people in here. One of my privileges is to sit on the International Academy of Quality, where I chair the Committee on World Health Reform. We're working on 3 projects: the next generation of healthcare quality measures, the next generation of patient safety, and cutting chronic illness in half in this decade. The last page is my contact information. I hope several of you will get in touch with me, because I want to do whatever I can to help you succeed in what you're doing. We're up to questions. Yes?
Do you have time, Maddie?
Yes.
Do you have to be there?
Well, go in the back and see it. It should be there. There is another set of, there's some samples of our joggers in back. So if you want to take one that's like, not too one, when you go, you can. If it's not what you want, it's not out there, let me know. I can get it to email it to you. Yes, sir.
Only slide 25.
Pardon me?
Slide 25 in your presentation, on slide 25.
Slide 25?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You say quality and innovation are not competing variables.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. I need to understand why you say they are not and why it's a
Excellent question. Thank you. And I was getting towards the end and I went too fast over that. The reason that I say they're not competing, one of the reasons I say they're not competing is because 2 companies that I work with, Apple and Samsung, both have very strong quality programs and both have very strong innovation programs and are both very well thought of. Another reason why I say it is the core of quality is this plan, do, check, act cycle. When you're doing improvement, at some point, you need to think about what I'm going to do differently. And typically in quality, we do brainstorming and benchmarking. There's 200 innovation tools. If we add more of the innovation tools to quality, then it strengthens quality. Now, Hewlett-Packard recently, like within the last year, had 60% of the business that was doing just innovation, have an idea and make it, try to sell it. And 40% of the business that was doing Six Sigma. Six Sigma was initially a 9-day course, then a 5-day course, then a 3-day course, and then e-learning. So, it's my opinion that the innovation is strengthened by quality and the quality is strengthened by innovation. It's my experience. I have a colleague from University of California. He's now living and working and teaching in Japan, and his belief is that the Japanese are not doing better because they spend too much time on quality and not enough time on innovation. So there are, I admit, there are divergent opinions on that, but thank you for raising that, because it's a very, very important question. Yes, sir?
A lot of the firms you mentioned, like Apple, Samsung, they're very big corporations with a lot of financial muscle.
Yes.
Is it difficult for smaller firms to implement like improved quality at the risk of like driving costs out of control? Like a lot of those firms, they can risk, they can take a chance of disrupting their process in order to implement quality control. Do you think there's a danger for smaller companies if they try?
The question of whether quality and cost are competing is a very important question. Deming's view is that you improve quality and cost goes down. Sometimes the word quality is confused with the quality of the process and features. So I got a good value on a Ford Lincoln or something like that, Town car or something, for these 10 days that I'm out here. And nobody was renting them, so they lowered the price to rent them. So that has a lot of features that another car I might not have, and the price tag for buying that car is a lot more expensive. So that's the cost of features. So if you're in a small business, maybe you can't afford to have high-cost features, which I think is what your question is. But if you improve quality, then you reduce cost. And the reason is, we talked about, like on the Pareto chart I showed you on the cost of healthcare in the U.S. The number one bar is chronic illness. It's almost 50%. If we, the experience that I've had is that the proven pilots show that if you do that approach, the first year you reduce healthcare costs by 40%. So if Notre Dame did that, for example, they would save $30 to $50 million in the next 5 years. It's a big company. But if you were a small company, you still can get major savings. And customers are going to want to buy high quality, and then you can have high quality and low cost. So they really go together. Is that helpful at all? It's an important question, and the thing that's usually the trick is thinking about the features. Yes, sir?
The other way I typically answer that is SQDC are the four. So if you think about safety, quality, delivery, and cost, in that order, right? So if you keep your workforce safe, and then make quality, and it's really uppercase Q and D, lowercase S and C, because if you keep your quality high enough and don't make late deliveries, the cost will automatically take care of itself. So in most companies, whether they're small or big, as long as you make good quality products and deliver it on time, the costs are automatically going to be in control, because what does good quality mean? Rework, you reduce your rework, you reduce scrap, you reduce all the things that are going to hurt the product. And delivery, a lot of times companies can't make deliveries on time, so they're working overtime. They're working Saturdays, they're working Sundays, to meet delivery. So that all adds cost to it. So if you focus on the Q and the D, regardless of your company size, you
Let me
should
make one
be-
other quick comment that I think you're going to get over here. The other thing is, if you're a very small business, then maybe you're selling to the public, but maybe you're selling to another company. And if you're selling to another company, then that company's concerned about quality.
It's like 40.
It's like the Ford example of the 19 out of 20 that lost their business. Which is pretty good. Yes, I think we're going to say
I was
something.
just gonna comment, you see the quality and innovation, again, I've worked in several different startups where my role was quality and regulatory affairs and reliability engineering. And again, there's always this battle with research about, myself imposing quality on the innovative process. But actually quality is I'm here to help you. I'm here to help you with nailing down what you're, and especially when it comes to designing a part, like example of flow cell, okay, where you may have really tight tolerances. And again, you've got this, a mill or something that's actually spitting out this part. And I'm the one that's going to measure that part for you. I'm going to tell you what features are, on a regular basis, not in control. Which means when you take all of these parts and put them together, and the higher the low tolerance, they may not function. And again, when it comes down to like a flow cell and the microfluidics arena, that can mean the difference between a machine going out in the field and coming back within a week. And I've seen it happen over and over and over again, where on first pass, when we put this machine together, 70% of our machines fail. So on first pass, that means they go through the whole manufacturing cycle, they come back, and someone's got to troubleshoot that thing. And guess what? You're looking for root cause. Why does this thing keep happening? And in that particular case, it was a flow cell. So the quality person can use these process control tools to actually, on a regular basis, say this is what we're getting from a lot to lot or within a lot, to kind of nail down what the design, kind of to stem back. These are design issues. They may be quality issues, but yeah, there's always this competing. But quality can be a facilitator in the smaller companies.
So one final comment I would make is people tend to think of quality as being within the specifications of the customer. But actually what's been discovered over the last 30 years is that if you continue to narrow the variation more and more and center it in the specifications, you tend to still get a lot of success with that. I can give you some examples. But look, no questions from over here? Oh, yeah, you count. You're on that side of the center.
How does this apply to solar service type industries? How can we take
True.
these more service oriented
Yes.
than product oriented businesses?
Okay, so one service oriented industry would be healthcare. Is that fair? I mean, not the healthcare products, but people provide the service. We got some healthcare people here, and so I'll talk about that. Healthcare, I could talk about universities. Is there anybody here from the Continuous Improvement Center? No, they might come, but I guess not. So let's talk about healthcare. Traditionally, not too long ago, for me, maybe a long time ago for you, in the early 80s, the healthcare hospitals were paid the cost of what they did and then plus administrative fee. And then they went to fee for service. So at that time they started thinking about looking at how we do things. And it became clear that if I came in with something wrong, 10 doctors would look at me and they'd have 10 different processes for treating me. And so the first thing that our healthcare research committee did was look at clinical pathways, how we can get the 10 doctors together to discuss how they handle it and to standardize it more. Now that followed through in terms of healthcare quality measures with people like the Joint Commission and URAC and the other accrediting agencies. And so what they're really doing is they get together a group of people and say, what should the standard be? And they agree on it, then they promulgate it. But there's 6 different standard organizations, and they all do it with their own group. And so they come up with standards that are contradictory. So I can meet your standard and violate your standard. So the project that we're doing is to use the QFD tool with it and to use the voice of the customer and data to find out what's really the best measure. So we think that's going to be a huge, huge benefit for healthcare. Customers want to be happy. So today I'm making these notes and I go over to Kinko's, making some copies. And the machine, 2 pages fed together, page 1 and page 2. So it's printing out these sets, and I'm making these charts, so I'm not looking at it. I come over, there's 17 copies of the notes made that have no page 2. So I go to the lady and I say, I have this problem. I said, do I have to pay for these? And she said, well, if you ran a sample one first, you'd find the problem. And I said, I know that, but I said I was rolling these up. And she said, well, I don't know if we can pay you. I says, well, is that a change in policy? Because I use Kinko's a lot. If something goes wrong with the machine, they refund it. So the reason the page is stuck together probably was the level of humidity in the Kinko store. But, so she gave me some refund. But that's a service kind of example of how it applies to it. Customers want good service. So there is a chart, there's something called the Kano chart where they talk about expected quality, one-dimensional quality, and exciting quality. So one-dimensional quality is having toilet paper in the restroom. If you have toilet paper, you don't notice. If you don't have toilet paper, you're upset. So that's one kind of quality. Another kind of quality is one-dimensional. If you don't have it, you're unhappy. If you do have it, you're happy. So it might be gas mileage, although the price of gas is going down, it probably still follows. Another one might be to have, exciting quality would be to have the GPS right in the dashboard. So if you didn't have it, you wouldn't notice that you didn't have it. But if you had it, you'd say, wow, that's cool, I really like that. So that's another, and you could apply that to any service organization. Think about those 3. The first one, expected quality, you learn from complaints. The second one, you learn from surveys. The third one, the customer doesn't know anything about, but you get an idea from the voice of the customer what kinds of things they're looking for, and you come up with things you can do because you're an expert at what it is that you do and you do it for people. But it applies to this as well. I did a project for the Pentagon on redesigning warfare for 2020 using the innovation tools. And I have no clearance, so I teach the tools and they go off, 125 of them at the Air War College. And they came back, so a week later I said, well, how'd it go? And they said, your innovation tools were the best ones we had. So you can even use these tools with service organizations that you don't understand. And by helping other people do it, they can solve things that they couldn't solve otherwise. I think that's helpful. Yes. Why don't we take, we're kind of up at 7. I know people are kind of, my guess is you're thinking 7. I'm going to be around as long as you want. The only thing that would be, I would consider a failure for this session is if nobody contacted me afterwards to say, can I learn more about this, or can I have this book, or can you help me with my competition or my entrepreneurial project? So hopefully, please say now. I'll make him feel happy on his birthday. I will follow up and I'll contact him. Go ahead, you had a question.
Can I go back to the engineering aspect of that?
Yes, please.
In the organization I was in this summer, I saw, kind of like you were discussing earlier, just a bit of tension between engineering and quality, because engineering, and kind of resulting from a misunderstanding of what quality did, because
Yes.
they felt that as obstructing creativity or their ability to get things done.
Right.
What do you think the proper relationship between quality and engineering is? And maybe going back a step, like, to education and engineering and the proper role of quality and learning about this kind of stuff. You know, in
So I'll give you a story. I like stories. People like stories. So John Akers was the chairman of IBM, and he was in trouble. IBM was in trouble, so he was in trouble. And he decided to make 3 major changes in the IBM Corporation. And one of those changes was to design products based on the voice of the customer. So he asked me to come in for 15 minutes and meet with the management committee who ran IBM to talk to them about the voice of the customer. So I gave him some silly examples and I talked to him about the voice of the customer. So after I was all done, he looked around the room and said, I think we'd rather make products that engineers want to make. What do you think? So like, guys, do you get it? So the issue is whether you're going to make whether engineering is going to make products they want to make, or they're going to whether they're going to make products that customers want. So this tool here, that's why one of the reasons why this tool is so powerful, because this tool has in the top chart the voice of the customer, and the second chart the voice of the engineer, and it gets combined. So you make a win-win, I guess is another way to say it. I think one of the things to do is to bring people together. We had a parallel problem with typically the engineering people do quality, and the HR people do things like facilitation and things to make people happy and that kind of stuff. And the HR people never talk to the engineering people. It's not exactly your question, but I think there's an analogy there. So what we did is I was working with an OD company, and we ran a workshop in which we invited the HR people and the engineering people from the same company. And in most cases, they never met each other until they came to this workshop in Arizona, I think we had it. So getting them together and finding common ground. The other tool you could use to do that, I talked a little bit about transformation, but when Stephen Hacker talks about transformation, he talks about getting individual and company goals aligned. So that's another kind of thing you can do. There's 3 books out there on transformation, so you can look at that, and there's tools in there. I mean, they don't mention engineers and quality, but they're tools that can help you do that kind of stuff. So why don't we break, and I hope you enjoyed it, whatever your expectations were. And I hope I get some requests to follow